To have Dr. Aderonke Kujore, is international education consultant and advocate. It's great to have you on the show.
Good morning. It's a pleasure to be here.
So, we keep talking about quality education, and right here in Nigeria, it's getting really expensive. Me, for one, I guess my daughter is about to enter secondary education, and the school fees I'm seeing right here is giving me quite a scare because everything's expensive now, and parents are having to deal with a rising cost of living. So how are you seeing all of this, impacting education in Nigeria?
Sure. I think there are a couple things going on. I think across the globe generally, there is a financial situation that everyone's, getting to bear with. And even the most wealthy are feeling a little bit of an impact of the financial situation across the globe. So you'll even see some of the wealthiest Nigerians struggling a little bit with increases in tuition because of where we are from an economic perspective across the globe and in Nigeria especially. That being said, I think Nigeria has a bigger issue to deal with when it comes to education, and that really is around the fact that we have so many children that are out of school. And their situation is a little different because there isn't, it's really not a matter of an increase that has recently happened over the last year or so. It's more cultural, it's more related to poverty in the fact that many of those people just have never thought about sending their children to school. And some of these children have been out of school for, 10 years and even more than that.
So what would you say is the underlying cause of the current challenges facing Nigeria's education system?
I think it's a number of things. First of all, I would say it's a matter of priority. Unfortunately, the people that make the decisions and the people that can be accountable to it have not made it a serious priority until now. And what that means is the budgets that could be going towards education are going to other things. So that would be number one. The other thing I would say is that for those who are sort of in the lower echelon, those who are on the poorer side, there are so many barriers to them being able to educate their children, and they don't see the value of educating their children. So it's both a matter of making sure that parents are aware of the value of an education and the risks that it poses to the country when their children are not educated, but also making sure that any barriers to education are removed. When you compare Nigeria to other countries across the globe who are doing better with education, some of the barriers that you see in Nigeria are non-existent in other countries. It's things like, the cost of registration, or the cost of, children having to buy their own seats in order to come into the classroom, or children having to pay for uniforms and things like that. Those are not existent in public schools in many of the other countries who enforce education for all. So those are some of the things that Nigeria probably needs to look at. And then the wealthy are not really seeing the impact. So for many of the wealthy, they can send their children to private schools and really ignore what's happening with the wider country. And so either they send them to private schools or they send them out of the country. And so they don't get to see, or they can ignore the grunt of what's happening. Unfortunately, that's not sustainable. And we're going to have a bigger issue if it's not addressed quickly. And maybe the last thing I would say is the absence of leaders who really have empathy for the people that voted them in. So if our leaders were more focused on making sure that the children whose parents voted them into office have a brighter future ahead of them, I think they'll make it a priority.
Right, and talking about parents that have to send their kids abroad to get an education, we've seen currency devaluation here impact how much dollars you get. You need more naira now, chasing a few dollars, even though we're seeing some stability at this time, but it has changed a lot when you're looking at foreign exchange. So how do you see this impacting, importation of education, going forward? Are we still, what kind of trends are you seeing, in that segment, where parents, trying to send their kids abroad for education?
Sure. I think there are a couple of things that are happening. Obviously, in the last few weeks here, the naira has begun to stabilize a little bit. If the naira continues to improve, unfortunately, those wealthy parents might not pay much attention to the education of the rest of the Nigerian populace. But if the naira continues to devaluate for long enough, it's going to bring them back to Nigeria and have them really start having a conversation about the need for quality education in Nigeria. Because they have options and because they can afford to send their children out, they're ignoring what's happening in Nigeria. But once they can no longer send their children out, which, I know that there were a number of children that were going through significant strain in the fall, being able to register for school because their parents could no longer afford it. So when their parents are no longer able to afford an international education, sending them out of the country, sending them to private schools, they will be forced to address the bigger education problem that we have in Nigeria.
We know a couple of countries, holding it down when it comes to developing the education system. So looking at countries like Finland and South Korea, we see they have a quite advanced education system. What can we learn from those countries?
Sure. I think when we look at Finland or South Korea or even the US, I think we need to make sure that we are realistic with ourselves, first of all, in that they are so much more advanced and we need to take the first baby steps to try to get to where they are getting. Some of the things that you'll see that is, that happens in all those countries is the idea of an equal education for everyone. There is equity in education. Everyone is required to be in school, and education is being funded at a certain level. The availability, the infrastructure is being funded by the government and not by parents. Paying for their individual children to bring in desks and chairs to school. So I think those are some of the things that you'll see across all of those countries. And in order for Nigeria to be able to get there, first of all, we need to make sure that we're identifying all our children. So when you think about Finland or South Korea or the US, for instance, all their children are tracked from birth, and there is someone that is responsible for ensuring that all those children that are born are in educational systems of some sort through a certain level. And that's what we lack in Nigeria. We have a continuous growth in the number of children in our population, and there is no tracking. There's no accountability from the parents. And so there's no way to ensure that all of those children are in school. And in all honesty, there is also a growing industry, or there's a market for children who are not in school. They can go on the streets and beg and make decent money when they beg for the day. They can, obviously, many of them are engaged in child labor. So until we start to take some of these things off the table, make it non-profitable for children to be out of school, we will not begin to see a change in where our education system is trending right now.
Right, and every year we keep having different budgets, for the economy. What kind of spend would you like to see, going forward regards to education?
I think it's a couple things. I think there's a lot of conversations right now in terms of the education spend and how to make sure that that budget is taking from the top of, the country's budget before, going through some of the other bureaucratic systems. But I think it's more than just the budget. For those who remember, there's a lot of conversation today about the education funds that have not been accessed by a majority of states across the country. So there have been funds in UBEC that have not been taken advantage of. So it's not a matter of the money not being there. It's a matter of those who have the responsibility for educating our children not making it a priority. They will explain that there are reasons why they have not accessed the funds, because it's, the funds that are currently there are matching funds, but they're spending money on other things. Everyone's building an airstrip now. Everyone's building roads and other things, infrastructure, but they're forgetting the importance importance of education and the fact that if we do not educate all our children, the future for our country is really at high risk.
All right, thank you so much. It was great having your perspective. Dr. Aderonke Kujore is a national education consultant and advocate. Thank you for